Thank you guys all for being here tonight. Before we get too deep into this way of transcendence, we're going to get right into doing part of that way of transcendence, which is calling in the light. Now, I think most of you here are familiar with that, but I will, for those who join or who watch this later, what is the light? The light is God's energy that's serving this creation. It's uplifting, it's unconditioned energy that originates from the higher realms, from the heart of God. So after calling in the light, I'm going to be playing a recording of the Anai Hue. And that is, the hue is the Sanskrit word for God. And that brings us into that frequency. And when we use the anai as the prefix, as in anai hue, that brings in the empathy. So when we're in a group together physically, which is probably our preference, we can all chant it together out loud, the anai hue. And that can bring us into a resonance and a harmony. Though when we're on these calls, these Zoom calls, these recordings, we'll have to do it. I'll play the recording, and if you're in a place, you can chant along with it. So to start, I'm just going to start by calling us in the light. I will play that on a hue, and then I will bring us back into the room. Lord God of the universe, we uplift our eyes and our lives and our souls into your presence that is always with us, in us, filling and surrounding us, protecting us as we walk through these worlds of reflected light. We once again tap into that pure energy of your loving, which is the light, and allow that light of the Holy Spirit to fill us, to move through us, and to wherever we are, the places, the spaces, the land, the buildings, and all those people who may be nearby. And we bring this light more fully together as we focus on the Spirit and on the light, so that as we're here tonight for this next period of time, focusing on you, focusing on the loving, on the light, and your teachings of the sound, that this may be a focal point in this world, bringing greater upliftment to all. Thank you, God, for all the blessings. So be it. Okay, well, it is good to have you all here tonight to be present in this evening, and all those who join us later in this recording. You are also included in this light gathering, this gathering discussing the way of transcendence. I see that some of you have already been part of the 4-week class that I've done on this, and I thank you guys for showing up and being present here. I wanted to discuss more about how this way of transcendence, how we can utilize that as a focal point for our lives in this world. And that's why we're here tonight. We're living in a world with increasing turmoil, or so it seems, especially from what I'm viewing, the turmoil within each person. And you can feel it, you can see it, you can see people talking about it. People feel like there's something really wrong, like the world's going in the wrong direction. Um, there's more upset and disturbance that we're dealing with, and it's amplified by our latest technologies. Rather than hearing about a tragedy in a story, as in past times, or reading about it in the newspaper, seeing it once in person if you live through it, or watching it once on the evening news, today we're bombarded with the same disturbing images and the ideas and things that are bothersome to us over and over, especially those on social media. And many people are these days. And so you see it in the psychic frequency. It's exhausting. I mean, no wonder, no wonder we're all so exhausted sometimes, is that there's all these frequencies that we're dealing with. And even if we're not on social media as much, it affects us when we're around others. We have something really precious within us, and that's our attention and our focus, and that's our energy. And so that's part of what I'm doing here with the way of transcendence, with the triangle of transcendence, is creating a more positive focal point and touchstone. So we give our creative energy into where we focus our attention. There were some experiments in the 80s and 90s. Maybe you've heard of this, that where there's thousands of people who come together and meditate. And what they found is that it reduced crime, violence, suicide, international conflict, international terrorism, even lifted the stock market. And they repeated this a number of times in different places, all with similar effects. And it's called the Maharishi effect. It's so when you take that and you go, well, it's no wonder that our world is becoming more chaotic, because there's the positive side of that, but there's also the negative side, which is when people meditate on the negative, which we are all doing when we're always meditating. Let's put it that way. Every thought is a prayer. Every focus of our attention is a meditation. And so we're always meditating. And as people are focusing their attention, their meditation, their prayer on these negative images, and when you have many millions and probably billions focused on that, on these disturbing things, that creative force that's within each person starts to create that around us. And so you end up getting more of that disturbance. The good news is that it takes a lot less of us people holding the light, who are focusing on God, who are meditating, doing spiritual exercises, who are maintaining our focus towards the positive. It takes a lot less of us to really affect change in this world. Here's a quote from John Roger. Because energy follows thought, my advice has always been to hold thoughts that uplift you. Hold images in your mind that you want more of. So I'm probably not telling most of you here what you don't already know. But if you already know this, why is it still so difficult for us all? Because we know it. I think inherently, intuitively, we all know this. There's this quote that I've liked for many years, which is by Thomas Carlyle, and it says, "No pressure, no diamonds." So this world is a classroom. It's designed to challenge you so that you grow into the greatness of who you are. And just like diamonds, sometimes that takes some pressure, because many of us in this Western world have lived in a time of unprecedented prosperity historically and relative political stability. It's shocking when we see and are living through a world that seems less stable. Others in other parts of the world may have more experience with this. But change and instability in the world is actually the mean, it's not the exception. Most of us have lived such a small point of history in this lifetime that it doesn't seem as stable as we think it should. Although some part of us that has lived through these things in past probably goes, oh no, I don't like this because I remember what this was like. Uh, So one of the ways we can do this is to fundamentally change our underlying belief about how the world is supposed to be. That's often what gets us into trouble is spiritual people who are very optimistic, and all of a sudden it's like, why isn't the world this beautiful place that we thought it should be if we're doing all the right things? Well, maybe it's the opportunity, as John Roger called acceptance, the first law of spirit, is to accept the nature of how this world is. And once you start accepting it, you start understanding that there is a purpose to the challenges that we're facing. Some of the greatest mystics, prophets, spiritual beings, philosophers, leaders were all born out of these kind of times. I was just reading about Cicero, who, as many of you may know, is one of the great philosophers and statesmen of ancient Rome. His ideas were considered a major influence 1400 years after he was alive in the Renaissance, when the Renaissance happened, I think it was in the 1400s. And Cicero was alive in, I believe it was like around 63 BC, so a bit before Jesus. And he lived in extremely chaotic times. There was civil wars and coups and rebellions and major changes in the Roman Empire's governance. And he was a senator and he held different positions, eventually was executed, but he still managed to leave these writings that then inspired the Renaissance and humanism and things of uplifting nature over 1,000 years later. Not too long after he died, it was Jesus came around, Jesus of Nazareth, and I probably don't have to tell you how much he influenced this world since his life, but also it wasn't very stable or politically cruisy times when he was alive, as I'm sure you know that story. So turmoil is nothing new. And in fact, it can bring us into the greatness of who we are. I studied Lincoln a lot in that time period, Abraham Lincoln of the Civil War period of the US. And I was going to say the last Civil War period, light to that. So Abraham Lincoln, he was a failure for most of his life in many areas, and he also had some successes, nothing remarkable, but it was really in the extreme challenging time that he lived that the beauty of his consciousness and the strength and the endurance and the wisdom of who he was manifested. If he just had lived in normal times, you may never have heard of this man, but because of those times. And so for all of us, I think as we're on this path, we get to be that. It doesn't mean we have to be famous or some great, notable historical figure. It's really about we can use these times as a way to do it. So, because turmoil is nothing new, our technology of today amplifies consciousness. And that's what's interesting about today, is that it amplifies the consciousness because our energy goes into this and then it amplifies it. And it can amplify the negative as well as the positive. So Aristotle said Aristotle said, let me try that again, if I can get it right. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And I know that John Roger, who I reference a lot because I lived with him and worked with him, and he taught me a lot about all of these things. He used to say, if someone asks me what I'm doing, just tell them I'm working on my bad habits. And so, what can we do? Well, it's an amazing time to be alive because of our challenges, because it's a great time to build that spiritual strength, to use this level as a, I wanted to say a ping pong ball for some reason, but as a trampoline. Sometimes when I'm doing this, my brain switches gears, but use this world as a trampoline to move into the higher consciousness. And so this is a great time for that. So getting back to that idea where the thousands of people meditated and it changed like crime rates and violence and all sorts of things, and they found it over and over. So that's a big clue. But in my experience, there's a lot more available than just passive meditation. In fact, the modern science on all this is only slowly catching up with what the mystical knowledge has been for ages. And so you have an opportunity in this world to live in that way of transcendence, in the way of loving, in the way of light and God and gratitude and blessings. So the way I personally relate to what I'm doing here with you and the work I'm doing is sharing the teachings of the spiritual heart and transcendence. That is how I manifest my purpose. And that's what I'm doing here. And that's what I am showing up continually doing. And I appreciate all of your support in going with me on that journey of sharing those spiritual teachings of the spiritual heart and transcendence. And the thing I've been relating to as a focal point, as a touchstone, as a framework for doing that, and a framework for using all these teachings is the triangle of transcendence. And I know many of you have done this now that are here and have your own personalized one. And I might actually have calling you guys to share a little bit about how that's worked for you. But to have that as a focal point and the simplicity of it is one thing I want to talk about a little tonight and how we use it in this world. So I'm going to define the terms of my purpose. So, what is the spiritual heart? I say I'm sharing the teachings of the spiritual heart. What does that even mean? Well, the spiritual heart is all of who you are. That's just all of who you are. That's the spiritual heart because that's who you are. And what are the teachings then of that? Well, they're the way back to who you truly are. And who are you? Well, you're an extension of God in the soul. And that is why that whole thing about the meditation uplifts things. Why does that even work? Well, it works because you are an extension of God. Why does where we place our focus create our reality? Why does focusing on the negative create more of it? Why does meditating, focusing on positive, change the world around us? Because as an extension of God, you have that creative energy that is of God within you. You are a co-creator with God. Whether you know it or not, you're consistently co-creating because where you place your focus and attention, that creative energy just goes. Whether it's negative or positive, it just goes there. So as you put it more in the positive, that creative energy goes there and it changes. As you move it back into the light and into God, you bring more of that present here. And so the last part of my manifesting of my purpose is about transcendence. And what is transcendence? We talk about it a lot. The way I look at transcendence is it's just going home to God and no longer being bound by these levels, these lower levels, these denser levels, the physical level and the other levels, by your own creations, by your own incompletions. So this way is about you going home to God and how you face these challenges in the world from that awareness. And it's nice to have the ideas, but it's also really helpful to have the support in doing it practically. And Buddha said, endurance is one of the most difficult disciplines because it is to the one who endures that the final victory comes. And John Roger shortened that a bit and modernized it and said, he wins who endures to the end. And so endurance becomes a big key to this. And so it becomes adding, remember, we were talking earlier about improving the bad habits. Well, part of that is bringing forward the good habits. I was thinking about that the other day of the parable in the Bible of the wheats and the tares, which are weeds. And you don't try to pull out the weeds while the wheat's growing. You burn them in the fire after you cut, after the wheat grows full, you cut it all down and then you separate it and burn the others. And I was looking at it from a psychological framework, and the way I interpreted that, everyone gets to interpret it how they want. So I figure I can too, is that the more we bring forward and focus on the positive, that's how we manifest more positive in our life. And that's how we deal with the negative. It's not always just ripping them out. Sometimes it's about where we're placing our attention and not giving the energy to the negative habits. And it takes a great deal of endurance to maintain that positive focus. I'm going to admit someone joining us. Hello. So it takes a great deal of that endurance, and you can use all the help you can get in maintaining that positive focus. And one of my favorite quotes that is attributed to Da Vinci says, "Simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication." I think that that is really what has informed a lot of how I look at the multitude of teachings and spiritual practices, is how do we just really get to the essence? How do we really get to the simplicity? How do we really just integrate the core things in our life so at least we have that basis? And the way I do that is through this triangle. And I'm going to share that with those of you who aren't familiar with it by sharing my screen here. And those of you who are familiar, this will be a reminder. Let's see. There we go. So this is the triangle of transcendence. Very simple, but as you can utilize it, this is the simplest aspect of it, and that's sound, and that love and light. And how I define those, and I'm going to talk about how I define those conceptually, and then how that actually applies to what we're dealing with today and how you can apply it. And even those of you who have that personalized version, how you can really, you just a refresher of how to utilize that. So the first is a sound, and that's the sound current of God. And that's the frequency of God that you can tap into on the inner. And you do that through the practice of an active meditation, of spiritual exercises, of moving back, chanting the tone that will vibrate your frequency of your consciousness. Move your attention back into the third eye area, near the pituitary, back there. And listen, and you open your spiritual ears and your spiritual eyes, and you can allow that sound. It's the sound beyond the silence. I think they call it the cosmic sound, or the cosmic minute, because it's that, or the cosmic second is actually, I think, what they call it, which is that moment that when you tap into this sound, and that's the inner path. When you tap into that, it can feel like an eternity or a moment, and you have no idea how long you were in that consciousness. And it it refreshes your whole beingness when you tap in, when you get a taste of the sound current. So the sound, that is an essential aspect of what we're doing. The light, that's what we talked about in the beginning when we called in the light, which is that energy of God that serves creation. The love is who you are. That is, Khalil Gibran said, your work is your love made visible, I believe. And that is, we are God's work made visible. We are God's work made manifest. And so we are that loving because that's who we are. And so as you are working, one of the biggest, which I'll get into in a minute, biggest tools and techniques we use in that side of it, or in that corner of the love, is forgiveness. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And that's where we work with our focus and our perspective. So we have the sound, the love, and the light. And then that spiral there, which I don't believe is written on it right now, but the spiral is the mystical traveling consciousness, which is in all levels as a transport mechanism, as a consciousness of transportation that moves everything back into God. And so how does this apply? So the more you resonate with the sound, as we talked about earlier in that the Maharishi effect, that as more people meditate together, it actually, they find it changes the world around us and lowers crime, etc. Well, as you tap in, that's a key aspect of the inner work, of tapping into the sound, tapping into the sound current. And that it's not made for this world, it's made for your soul and the spirit, but it does affect this world. Now, the light is God's energy that serves this creation. And that's something that we can use all the time. And I have seen it work in so many amazing ways. Even in business, I remember there was this one time dealing with a really difficult situation that it didn't look like there was much variation on how it could go. I mean, it didn't look good. And so looking at that, and I just held the light and I just kept putting light into that situation, not necessarily to change it, but just to bring more of that energy into it. And then that energy would do whatever it did. And its nature is uplifting. It uplifts the karma. It uplifts to, allows for more grace to take place. And so as I was holding the light, we're going down this road, and all of a sudden, and I don't even know how it works because it's amazing, is it was almost like we just bypassed how it was supposed to happen, how it was going to happen. And it just went just like a little bit around, and we just got around that, and it was like, wow, that's amazing. And it was just holding in that frequency of the light. And I've had those experiences so many times, not just business, but in personal life and relationships and in driving and everything, where that light, keeping it around you, keeping it in you, keeping it is a conscious focal point in your life, changes the likely outcome, uplifts it into a more graceful outcome. And it's really incredible. And so that's another way that you can utilize this. And then love, the primarily tool is forgiveness, as I said. And forgiveness as a framework for living is incredible. With all that's going on right now, the power of forgiveness, and when you start choosing to live your life from that framework of forgiveness, it actually creates value for life itself. Because as long as someone's alive, you have that opportunity for whatever ways you've missed the mark or they've missed the mark. There's that opportunity for you or them to forgive, to let it go, and to move into that greater spiritual loving consciousness. And then all the past things, because of forgiveness, are let go, which is why it's important to have the way of forgiveness is one of longevity. It's important that we have the longevity because of forgiveness. If there's no forgiveness, then life wouldn't have the same value. And others' lives, especially the people we don't like, would not have the same values as a soul, as because we are forgiving and because we hold that door of forgiveness, it gives them an opportunity to walk through that door and to let go into the loving, and that past is just cleared away. It doesn't mean that the karma doesn't still have to be resolved in terms of the lessons that we're here to learn and all of that. But that judgment, that punishment, that the law that just holds us and that holds others in these trapped consciousness as a prisoner to our own judgments, that can let go. And then we can move into that unity and that oneness that's beyond all of the opinions and judgments and what's been referred to as Rumi's field. We can move into that because of this forgiveness. And so that's one of the most powerful ways. And so, as you can see, using the triangle is as a focal point, it really covers the essentials of how to live a life of transcendence in this world. Because if you're tuning into the sound, if you're using the light, and that's like, there's infinite ways to be bringing forward and walking in the light. And if you're using forgiveness, that's the way. that's the positive way here. That's where we can learn and grow. And then it doesn't matter what's going on in the world because we're choosing to hold in this focal point. And so for those of you who've been in the 4-week course, for those of you who haven't, I want to just tell you about it. And for those of you who have been in it, I am doing another one. And I know that you have an email about that. And I'd love to have you join us again. It starts on October 8th and it's on Wednesdays at this same time for 2 hours. And this is a 4-week course, and you'll create your personalized version of the Triangle of Transcendence. You'll get your daily Calling in the Light recording from me. You'll get a weekly class with others to awaken more to your triangle and personalize it. And you'll have an opportunity to use the light to bring these practices that I was just talking about into your life in a more profound and consistent way, having that triangle as a touchstone and tracking it all to easily can bring that endurance part of it of continually to bring that back. And so I'm going to share the link. Oh no, here we go. I'm going to share the link with you guys. If I can, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And a link for a discount code. Those of you who've taken it already, you have your own discount code in that email. But you can go to that website and sign up if you're interested in the course, and there's more information about it there of how you can get that. And just, I did mention the personalized triangle, and so I'm going to just show. So when you personalize it, you're going to personalize these other aspects that I put in here, which is your intention. And that is really it's the highest motivator in your life. It's the spiritual opportunity for you in this lifetime, the highest awareness that you can hold. It's God's first principle. It's what God is, the highest intention. So all of your true intentions will lead you back to God. You're not creating it. It already exists within you. And it becomes a primary focus in your life of the inner. And then you have the purpose of service there at the base. And that purpose of service is how that intention expresses into the world. And that really is how God serves others through you. Because your service really is your purpose. And so as you you become aware of how God is already and has been your whole life, serving others through you. That becomes your purpose of service. And then you have the three sides, and one of them is the mental focus. And that is where you place your mental focus, because that produces the energy, the inner experience of when you are in alignment with the intention, with your purpose of service, what that inner experience is, and the manifestation, which is the action into the world. So important. We can have all the inner, we can have the focus, we can have the feelings, but we need the action. We need to manifest this into the world. And so I'm going to just show you mine, my personal one. So, and then you have the I am transcending into spiritual liberation. That's my intention. My I am is I'm demonstrating and being the teachings of the spiritual heart. But see, right now, what I'm doing is I'm sharing the teachings of the spiritual heart and transcendence. I'm physically doing that. This is my purpose. This is the manifestation of that purpose. And so this is what you'll end up with as your own personalized version of the triangle of transcendence. And you will receive a printed out copy of that at the end, which is kind of cool. Those of you who have taken it, if you haven't gotten it yet, it is on the way, all of yours, but it looks like something like this. And oh, now it disappears. See, it's a disappearing. It's very spiritual because you can't even see it. It's like one of those Harry Potter, like disappearing paper. Um, anyway, so if you're interested in that 4-week course, it's 2 hours a week, and it helps you get that triangle. And I'll read something that one of the people who took it said, and then if any of you who have taken it would like to say something about it, that'd be wonderful. So the Way of Transcendence course has been extremely impactful for me. I'm nearly finished with the workshop and can honestly say I'm walking away with new insights, tools, and awareness. Before joining the class, I was seeking a simpler practice to root me amidst the chaos of life. This has been that, simple and effective tools to transcend the surprises of life, and I'm forever grateful. Not to mention, I am meeting such a wonderful group of people. Thank you, Nat, for putting this out into the world, Megan. And if any of you have any comments about what value you got from doing this 4-week course for those who haven't taken it, I'd love to hear from you. Let's see if I see a couple of you here. Would either of you mind sharing? All right, Ken. Perfect. Thank you for here. I'll ask you. Let me just put you up on the
Okay.
there you go.
Well, I have my
Oh, you got it.
have it right here.
Fantastic.
Just got it. It was on the doorstep yesterday morning, and Max was all excited about it, my little puppy. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got it, I got it. And so, but we went out for a walk, and I was able to open it up when I got home. So,
Wonderful.
but it was uh, it just is a simple way of seeing things. Um, uh, for years, I've heard all these explanations, all these words that made me just think, okay, I'm devoted there. I am devoted there. But getting them all together to work in unison was the difficult thing. And I think, well, I did that, but I didn't do anything with that. And how does it connect? And this is a simple way of connecting what you're doing with your life. And so it just, and where you're going. And that is such a delight to have in a very, I mean, I need simple in order to understand. I really do. So, I mean, at this point, I forget a lot of things. And so I just figure, okay, I just have like a few things to remember with this. Uh, JR had so many quotes that I used to collect his quotes and I used to recite them and I kept reciting his quotes. And I thought, but that takes me so many different places. And this is getting a lot of what he's talking about, um, and puts it all together, um, which is actually what he was talking about, but I didn't get the connection. So this has been delightful. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thanks for sharing. And it's good to see you here. Um, Leslie, well, hold on one sec. Let me just add you in here. Okay.
We have time. I should
Yeah,
have
of
mine too.
course.
Okay, I got mine too.
Oh,
Awesome.
nice.
You got it. I'm so excited.
Fantastic.
I love it. I just really, it's like touches my heart. And thank you, Nat, for taking time to put that together. And I'm going to get a frame and stick it on my wall. But anyway, yeah, I agree with the simplicity, and which you have said from the start, and but my family, I come from a family that just loves to complicate things. And so I kind of have that, you know, rolling around in my brain. It's like, oh, I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to think about the triangle. But then it's like, wait a minute, it just takes me like right into spirit. So why not? So that's what I've been doing. I've just been practicing the simplicity of it every day. And that for anybody who's thinking about taking the 4-week course, it's really a great course. It got a lot out of it. I feel more grounded and stronger inside me and just more willing to handle all the, as somebody said, surprises that's showing up daily. So yeah, I really appreciated it and still appreciate it. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say a little about that is that there's so many tools, and my teacher, John Roger, brought forward like a massive amount of different techniques and tools, and with all the spiritual teachers and ways and things that are available in this world, there's just so much. And and a lot of the last number of years has been me really looking at and meditating on and asking for clarity on of how do you present this information in the cleanest, clearest, simplest way that really gets the information in a way that people can understand it and utilize it in their lives to have that experience of the greater loving, of the greater awareness spiritually and what's available. And it took a long time, and eventually the pieces started coming together, got some in the dreams, some symbols and some things. And then one morning I actually woke up and it all just came together as the triangle of transcendence, as that simple focal point. And it really is a framework to utilize. And with any tool and technique and framework, it really is there until you get to what it is. And once it's like you use the spiritual mantras and listening inwardly until you're actually in the experience of the sound current, because then you don't need any of the tools and techniques anymore because you're in that experience. And the same is true with this, is it just gives a great way to simplify and bring the purpose of it all into clarity in a way that you can utilize the tools and techniques in a simple format. And so that it becomes reachable, because sometimes, like you said, we all tend to confuse and to use more, and it can become a lot. And it's okay if we still do that, even as long as we have the essentials. And that's really what this is about, is having the essentials in your life. And so then if you want to do all the other stuff, great. And you want to get confused or not, that's all okay, as long as you keep going back to the sound current, the light, and the loving, and what that means in terms of the practices of forgiveness, the listening to the sound current, the spiritual exercises, and the calling in the light in as many ways as you can every day for the highest good. And so that's really, when you brought that up, that really is a big part of this, is to bring it into the simplicity, to make it utilizable. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm using it. I'm creating a new word if it's not. It's to make all of those teachings utilizable and in a way that when things, there's a way when it's like simple, it's a lot easier when things are going haywire to move back into the simplicity. If it's too complex and things are going haywire, it's really hard to get in touch with that, because you just need that one thing to grab a hold of. And so this, I feel, is like that part of how we can utilize these teachings more effectively. And so also open it up for any questions that anyone else has about this. I'm going to look at the gallery view. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your little zoomy hand or raise your actual hand and I'll see you. And if no one has any questions, okay, Gretchen.
Hello, Nat. Thank you. I couldn't raise the hand because I'm in the cell phone and I couldn't
It's
find it here.
okay. Raising it like this works fine.
I guess I don't know if I have a question. What I do observe and I'm very grateful about is that the course shows you simplicity. When I was listening to the sharing of Ken, once he said simplicity, I love that because sometimes for me it is easier to understand it like if I'm a little kid. You know, when you explain to a little kid things and it's and they get it easy and not complicated, and sometimes that works. And we've been working with different books of JR. We read every morning, and there's a group that we work with, and we read about JR and we reflect upon the books and all that. And one thing that I'm loving about and discovering is that um, we're having these beautiful experiences with the spirit. And once we get into the spiritual exercises afterwards, for me it is easier to get into it. And you today were saying about tapping into that energy, into that moment that could be eternal, or it could be a second or a few minutes. And it clicked me because I was like, oh my God, it's true. So today I notice it, that sometimes I had that experience. Um, and one of the things that I'm reading about JR is that you have to keep practicing and practicing until you get to leave it, like all the time. But then you were saying, and this is one thing that I would love to um, get into, was that once you're there, you're always there because you're always been there. I mean, we're always been there, but it's about the conscious about it, right?
Yeah, so there's a part of you an aspect of you, the soul, that is always there.
Mhm.
And we get senses of it, and sometimes we see through those eyes, and it's just that observation. Like we can be
Mhm.
upset and even speaking, and then some part of us is just observing us doing that.
Mhm.
And so there is a part of us that's always has been and always is that essence of God. And so it is that. But it's really on us to in a way to drop the sheaths that we've taken on, and to be able to just be in that awareness consciously. And there is that one that is the mystical traveler that does do it. It's happening no matter whether you're doing it consciously or not. And it just becomes, how aware do you want to be of your own movement of spiritual inner awareness?
Mm.
And because it's taking place, your soul's progression is just going on, but
Mm.
you can choose to have a greater awareness and a cooperation and become in the more full awareness of the co-creator with God and with that God force within you.
I understand what you're saying. Yes. Okay. Yes, because I sort of a way I've practiced that exactly what you're saying, but probably like fractions of times. But
Yeah, it's that little, it's just those little things, and it becomes like extending the time a little bit.
mhm.
And over time, it is that spiraling. That's why, part of why I put it as a spiral, that's part of why it's represented as a spiral, is because some on a spiral, sometimes you think you're just kind of going back around, but really it's lifting, and it's this gradual lifting, and then one day you're kind of looking back and you're like, oh wow, I've I didn't realize how far I've come. And it's not that like you've gone anywhere, it's just that how far I've come in opening to this higher awareness of who I already am, and the loving that infuses, and that's below. Soon as you quiet, as soon as you uh, take a moment, that comes in, or it's always there, it's just we notice it.
Yes. Thank you, Nat.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Mhm.
I'm just going to put the gallery again, and if there's anyone else that would like to ask a question, and if not, you can join that 4-week course. I did post the link there. And part of one of the things I do that some of you join is I have a weekly light gathering on Tuesday nights, at least in the Western Hemisphere. Here in Australia, I think it's Wednesday mornings. I think 10 a.m. is, if I'm right, in Sydney, Australia. If I'm right, you can look on the website, but it's 5 p.m. LA time, Pacific time. It's 8 p.m. in East Coast time, and currently in Puerto Rico time. And that's just another focal point where we can just put things in the light and utilize the light side of the triangle. And I've seen some of you there, and it's a beautiful thing. I had our friend Simon. He wants to start doing translation, so we may have a more Spanish version, translated version as well. So we may get more of the Latin community in that gathering. But if you want more of that, you can go to my website, transcend.online, which I'll put here, and that has both the course, um, It has both the course here, but get that code if you're going to join the course. If you want to audit it, I sent you guys your own code for auditing in an email. And then if you have more questions, I'm just going to put my email here. And for those of you who are joining the recording of this, the video of this, you can go to my website, transcend.online, to contact me if you have any other questions or would like to join, but just have some questions about that. That's all I have for tonight, and I'm grateful for you all for coming.